If you think all cards are simply flat and uninspired, it's time to reconsider. I'm here to introduce you to some exciting funfold cards that spring to life the moment you open them. No need for complicated die cutting or tedious processes. With just a few scraps of pattern paper and some ingenious folds, you can create stunning pop-up cards that are bursting with layers, movement, and delightful surprises. Stick around because I'll walk you through each step so you can craft these fun folds yourself. So let's dive in. Today I'll be making double pop-up and explosion cards to take fun folds to a whole new level, and that too with minimal supplies. This is the first double pop-up card I made. It's actually a tiny bit lopsided, to be honest, but it still works. When you open it, you get this fun pop-up effect, and of course the pattern paper is an important factor here. Then I made a more masculine version, which is always a challenge. This one has more sentiments inside, and again, you get that same pop-up mechanism. On the surface, it looks like a very plain and simple card, but I love the little surprise inside. So that's what we're making first. Before we begin, I want to give you a quick look at the cutting and scoring template for the pop-up mechanism, and I'll tell you in just a bit on how to download this. I provided all the measurements, score lines, and the pencil mark reference points, as you can see here. And this shaded section points to what needs to be trimmed away. Of course, I'll walk you through the steps in just a second, but I wanted to mention that the downloadable template will be there for you to follow along. I'll be making an A2 card using this beautiful pattern paper set from Not Too Shabby. This is an older set, and if it's still available, I'll link it in my list of supplies because their pattern papers are to die for. I'll first cut out the two inside panels, and since this paper is directional, I need the pattern to go this way. I'm cutting these to 4 by 5¼ inches, and I'll reserve the leftover strips for my envelopes later on. Now I need two panels measuring 3 inches by 3¼ inches and two additional panels measuring 3 inches square. I'll also fussy cut out a cup from this pattern paper as an embellishment. For the last pattern sheet, I'm not cutting it just yet because I haven't decided exactly how I want to finish the card front, so I'll set that aside and continue with the rest. Alright, so I created these two labels off camera. I realized that if I placed the little fussy cut element directly on the paper, it would get lost in the background. So I decided to mat it on a white circle just to make it pop a bit. Since this is going on one of the inside flaps, I also wanted to balance it out. So I created a little sentiment circle to use on the other flap. I also pulled out a few better press sentiments from my stash. I'm keeping these handy and will decide which one to use a bit later. I'll also need some scrap cardstock. I have a medium weight cardstock here to help me create the mechanism. I'll cut out two pieces that measure 1½ inches by 4¾ inches. I find the regular 80-pound cardstock is the best for this because heavyweight cardstock would be too bulky and lightweight would be too flimsy. By the way, you'll be able to download the template I showed you earlier from my blog post, and I've linked it for you in the video description. Now I'll show you two ways to create the pop-up mechanism. One using a scoring board, which is a little trickier since you can't see the grooves through the paper. And another way is using a wire trimmer, which actually makes this process much easier if you have one. I have this washi tape guide here on my board, which will make it a little easier to score, but still not a perfect solution. I'll need both panels to create the mechanism. I'll first score at 1 inch. I'll score the second panel similarly. Then I'll turn the piece around, and at the 3/4 inch mark, I'll add a light pencil mark right on the score line. I'll add another pencil mark at 1¾ inches along the bottom edge. I know it's hard to see, but these small marks matter for the next step. The second panel similarly, add pencil marks at 3/4 of an inch and 1 3/4. If you want to see the hack where I explain the washi tape guide, I'll link to that tutorial in the video description as well. It has lots of card making hacks besides this one. I'm lining up the pencil mark on the score line with the one on the edge, and I'm using the tape as a guide to find and align the points with the groove adjacent to the tape. Basically, I'm trying to imagine where my scoring tool will land, and that is what makes it tricky. Since this needs to be really precise, I'll test it out by bringing the tool down very gently just to check the alignment. Since it's not quite on the mark, I'll nudge the paper until it lines up perfectly. Now I can make a proper score line. Then I'll rotate the piece and line up this corner with the groove. I need to let the bottom half of the panel hang over the edge so it fits. Again, I'll lightly lower the tool, check the alignment, adjust, and score. It's important for the score lines to be fairly accurate to allow the pop-up mechanism to work correctly. Now you can see the score lines. And then I'll trim away this little section here. This is what the finished piece should look like. And then this is the wire trimmer method. You'll need a stylus for this. I'm using my Salmon System jewel picker, which also has a stylus end. I'm lining up both the dots along the wire guide. Then I'll hold the paper firmly in place, move the wire guide gently out of the way, and score with the stylus. That gives me my first diagonal score. Next, I need the score line to run from the corner to the second pencil mark. I'll line it up again, adjust, and score. This is so much easier since I can use the wire guide for alignment. Now I have the same shape as the first panel, and I'll trim away the rectangle on this one as well. Now both mechanism pieces are ready. On one, I'll fold the flap inward toward the pencil mark. On the other, I'll flip it over and fold the flap so they mirror each other. It'll become clearer when I assemble the mechanism. I'll use my magnetic glass mat now for the assembly since it's so much easier to work with my magnets. Let me start by adhering the inside panels. Adhere this white 3 1/4 by 3 1/4 square to the center for a message or a sentiment. So here's how the mechanism goes. This piece goes on the right, and the wider part of each piece stays towards the inside, just like you see in this card. Now here's a little pointer. When I first made this card, I made the mistake of sticking these panels too close to the edge. What happened was when I closed it, the mechanism was sticking out from the sides. I had to trim it down a little, which wasn't a big deal because if you stick them close to the edges, you do end up with plenty of space to write your message. But if you want to avoid that overhang and keep everything nice and tight, just stick it a little further toward the inside. That's exactly what I'm going to do for this one, and I'll line it up with the edge of this inside white piece. Now here's the critical part of the mechanism that will allow the inside flaps to pop open correctly. I need to match the point of the triangle to the fold line on the card base, both on the left and on the right. So I'll grab my glue, and I'm being generous here because glue gives me a few seconds to slide the panel into position. I'll place the first mechanism piece down, making sure that the triangle point sits right on the fold line. I'll hold that in place to set, and then I'll repeat the exact same thing on the other side. Okay, I'll just let that adhere for a minute. Now these flaps need to fold like this, and this part folds the opposite way. And these smaller triangles fold in, which once adhered to the top panel will make the inside flaps pop open. I think the glue has set now, so I'll start adding the 2 pattern paper panels. I'll use the 3 3/4 inch panels for the flap that will sit on the top. And when adhering, I'll have to ensure the pattern paper stays just shy of the score line so the piece can fold properly. I'll adhere the second one on the inside. Actually, this is optional because I just wanted to hide the white panel of the mechanism inside. And this time, I'll use the reverse side of the pattern paper. I find it easiest to line up the outside edges first since I need them to align properly. Now I'll adhere the second one the same way, right up to but not over the score line. So I'll add the circle labels to the flaps before I attach the last bits of the pop-up mechanism. By the way, I used white for the mechanism only because I wanted to be able to demonstrate the various score lines and pencil mark references. If I were to do this without it being a tutorial, I would have used a solid navy cardstock instead. I think the white is a little too stark for this, but well. Okay, now let's attach the mechanism to the top panel. I'm being generous with the glue again because this part takes quite a bit of pressure when the pop-up opens, and that's why it needs solid reinforcement. I'll close the card and hold it down with my magnets for a few minutes to ensure the glue has dried completely. All right, I am back and this has adhered really well. And look at this pop-up. I really like that it has a couple of layers of surprises with the little decoration on this flap and the extra sentiment on the other one. I also decided these strips were too small to use as the main sentiment on the card front, so I'll adhere this on the inside instead. Now it's time to decorate the front. Here's the story behind this label in case you're wondering what die set I used. I cut out the 2 lace strips for the first card in a way that left me with a strip like this, so I could use it for layering. Nothing goes to waste in my craft room if I can help it. I used an old Altenew stamp set. I think it's at least a couple of years old. I'll try to find it online so I can link to it. I stamped the sentiment with a bit of Pinkfresh Storm ink. I also used the Spellbinders die set to cut out both the matting and top layers. You might be able to see the edged border on this panel, and this one has a nice pierced edge. Since I like to conserve my supplies, I cut out the center so I can use it on another project. By the way, if you're looking for the list of supplies, you'll find affiliate links in my blog post, which is linked in the video description. It would help me a lot if you use the links if you decide to purchase any of these supplies. While they won't cost you anything extra, it will definitely help out my channel. So thank you so much if you decide to support me. I'll use foam tape behind both the sentiment and main card panels. I noticed the die set doesn't create symmetrical borders on all sides, but I suppose that's okay. To complete the look, I picked out 2 glittery snowflakes from my stash and I'll adhere them to the sentiment panel. To finish off, I'm using this pink pops of color from scrapbook.com. There we are. I know the color isn't showing up well on camera, but I'll add a couple of photos so you can see it afterwards. I'm trying not to stick my finger in the pops of color right now. Look at this, it's so cute. You could add some stamping here if you like, which I didn't do, but that's another option. I'll set this off to the side to dry and I'll be back with the next card. By the way, before I move on to the next card, I just wanted to show you how I store my pattern paper scraps. I made the sleeve to store everything together, and if you're interested in making it, I have a detailed tutorial for this in the storage hacks video that I'll link for you in the video description. These sleeves keep everything together. Scraps stay in the back so they don't fall out, and I can see the pattern and the name of the collection through this window. Let me start by showing you the scoring template for the explosion panel for your reference, because it shows you where to score and how to pinch the folds using the dashed lines and arrows. As I mentioned earlier, this template is also available in the blog post. Will hopefully make it much easier for you to follow along as you create your own card. For this next card, I've already done a bit of prep work, so we can jump right in. I'm starting with an A2 card base made from Spellbinders Indigo cardstock, and this one is going to be a gatefold design. I'll create the gatefold card base first, and the initial score line is at 2 1/8 inches. Since this is a heavyweight cardstock, I like to flip it over and score again along the same line because it helps the paper fold cleanly without cracking. Then I'll turn the piece around and repeat the same scoring on the opposite side at 2 1/8 inches. Once both lines are scored, I'll reinforce each fold with my Sizzix bone folder, making sure the edges meet neatly. Scoring on both sides makes folding so much easier. With that, the gatefold base is ready to go. I have this white cardstock that would go inside the card for the message and sentiment later. Next, I'll work on the inner explosion panel. The pattern paper I'm using is from an older Echo Park paper pad. This piece measures 8 by 4 inches, and I've also cut out 2 panels measuring 1 7/8 by 5 1/4 inches for the front of the card. Again, please check my blog post for the details. I'll score on the lighter side of the pattern paper so I can see the score lines clearly. I'll start by scoring at 2 inches, 4 inches, and 6 inches. Because the paper is on the thicker side, I'll flip it over and score along the same measurements again. Now for the diagonal scoring, I'll find the 4-inch score line, mark both edges lightly with a pencil so I can find them when I'm scoring, and I'll repeat that at the 2-inch and 6-inch points. I'll start by lining up the corner of my panel along the washi tape guide, skip the 2-inch score line, and line up the 4-inch mark along the tape and score. I could have done this with the wire trimmer, but I put it away. Next, I'll connect the 4-inch score line on the top edge to the bottom corner of the panel. I'll do the same thing by turning the panel around until all the diagonal lines form diamonds. Once all the scoring is done, I'll begin burnishing the folds. I won't crease the center 4-inch score line since I won't be using it to create a fold, but I'll burnish all the other vertical and diagonal lines, and I'll do it on both sides of the paper so the paper folds easily to create the explosion effect. I'm ensuring the edges match up in case the scoring didn't quite line up. I want the floral side of the panel on the inside, so I'll have it facing me. To collapse the panel into the explosion shape, I'll pinch in the vertical fold so the diagonal sections collapse, creating the triangle. Now I'll burnish the triangle really well so it holds its shape. I'll do the same on the other side, and you can rewatch this part. Actually, let me do it once more so you can see how it comes together. Now it creates a perfect diamond. Since everything is well creased, the paper will naturally fall into the correct shape. This will be the piece that pops open when the card is opened. Before gluing the explosion panel in place, I'll prepare the sentiment panel for the center, and I'll be right back. Let me start assembling the card now that I have all the pieces. I'll center the diamond on the card base, and I'll give it a couple of seconds since it's thick cardstock. When attaching the explosion panel to the inside of the gatefold flaps, I'll apply glue to one side at a time so it's easy to handle. Now I'll close the flap lightly and flip it around to stand it on its side so I can position the edge of the explosion panel a tiny bit away from the edge of the card base so it can open and close properly without extra tension. I'll hold this in place for a few seconds so the glue can grab, especially since this pattern paper is a little thick. I'll do the same on the other side and hold it down with my magnet for a few minutes. And by the way, if you are liking what you're seeing so far, please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and do subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, because that goes a long way to support my work. Once the inside is secure, I'll move on to the belly band. I keep a stash of pre-cut vellum belly bands in different widths, and this will make this step quick and easy. I'll wrap the vellum loosely around the closed card, not too tight and not too loose. I'll crease the edges and then trim off the excess. I'll cover the overlap with embellishments to give it a polished look. And ta-da! Here is the finished card, a beautiful wintry explosion design that opens up to reveal the explosion mechanism with a sentiment panel. I'll add a couple of snowflakes to the inside for a little extra detail, and the belly band slides on and off smoothly. I made a second version using craft cardstock. It's a clean, simple layout, and as you just witnessed, these cards are so easy to make once the scoring is done, and they come together without fuss and too many supplies and create beautiful cards. If you want more fun fold ideas, I have some even easier ones for you, and you can watch that video here.